You didn't click on this video by accident, and it's not about astrological curiosity, it's about timing. There are only a few days left until the total lunar eclipse on March 3rd, lining up with the full moon, and most people think the impact starts at the exact moment it happens. It doesn't. It never has. An eclipse doesn't create the shadow. It reveals the one that was already moving. And if you pay attention, it's already started. Not outside of you. Inside. A strange kind of exhaustion that isn't physical. A quiet irritation with things you used to tolerate. A discomfort you can't quite explain, like something's out of place, but no one else seems to notice. You try to rationalize it. Call it stress. A phase. Something that'll pass. But it doesn't. Because what's happening isn't an external event. It's internal pressure. Lunar eclipses don't just light up the sky, they press on the unconscious. March 3rd isn't just a mirrored numerology date, it's a symbolic turning point. The number 3 is about expression, identity, the social mask. When it repeats, it exposes inconsistency. And a total lunar eclipse works exactly where you hide what you don't want to face. The shadow isn't punishment, it's revelation. The question you haven't asked yet is, what inside you already knows this can't keep going? You feel like something needs to end, but you're afraid of the emptiness that comes after. So you push it down, postpone conversations, hold on to connections because of what they used to be. Pretend you still believe in plans that don't mean anything anymore. And this is where the mistake starts to form. The mistake isn't feeling afraid, the mistake is pretending you don't see it. Because before every eclipse, there's a kind of energetic pre-shadow phase. Days when your emotional field feels more sensitive, more raw. Small conflicts get bigger. Dreams feel more vivid. People from your past resurface, not always in person, but in your mind. That's not a coincidence, it's preparation. And every kind of preparation requires you to take a stand. What do you do when you realize you're about to lose a version of yourself? Most people try to save the old identity. They cling to the role, they defend patterns that don't fit anymore, they hold on to the story they built so they don't have to admit they've changed. But eclipses don't negotiate with personas. They strip layers away, and if you resist, they strip harder. Maybe you're trying to control something that's already off your path. Maybe you're still trying to prove something to someone who isn't even in the same place in your life anymore. Maybe you're holding on to pride that's costing you your peace. Can you see how this is already playing out? The shadow doesn't show up like a disaster. It shows up as uncomfortable clarity, and clarity hurts before it sets you free. Over the next few days, you're going to feel the urge to react, to confront, to make impulsive decisions just to release the pressure. This is where the mistake lives, the one that can cost you this entire cycle. An eclipse doesn't ask for reaction, it asks for awareness. But almost no one can sit and observe without doing something. If you act on impulse before March 3rd, you're not choosing, you're escaping. And escaping during an eclipse window can lock patterns in for months. There's a difference between moving through the shadow and fighting it. Have you noticed that every time you try to control what's already falling apart, your anxiety spikes? That's not bad luck. That's misalignment. The March 3rd eclipse isn't here to destroy your life. It's here to expose where you're lying to yourself. And if you keep holding up that lie, the cost will be dragging out a cycle that should have already ended. The shadow has started moving, and you know exactly where. The question isn't whether something is going to change, it's whether you're going to try to stop it. Take a breath before you react. Pay attention before you decide. Not because the sky demands it, but because your integrity does. In the next few minutes, you're going to understand the invisible mechanism that makes so many people miss the eclipse window, even when they think they're spiritually ready. And once you see that mechanism, you won't be able to pretend you didn't know. The mechanism isn't mystical, it's psychological. And that's why almost no one notices it. Days before a total lunar eclipse like the one on March 3rd, the mind slips into defense mode. You start feeling uncomfortable, but instead of going deeper, you try to fix it fast. You try to organize it, explain it, control it, like clarity can be forced. But an eclipse isn't about mental clarity. It's about emotional revelation. There's a brutal difference between understanding something and admitting it. And the invisible mechanism that makes you miss that window is simple. You'd rather understand than admit. Have you noticed that? You know that relationship is out of balance. You know that project has lost its soul. You know you're playing a version of yourself that doesn't match how you actually feel anymore, but you build sophisticated justifications to keep going. Because admitting means grieving. And the ego hates grief. On March 3rd, the full moon will be completely immersed in the Earth's shadow. Symbolically, that's the conscious mind diving into the unconscious. What you've pushed down rises up, not to punish you, but to integrate. But integration doesn't happen when you react. It happens when you can hold the tension without turning it into drama. The mistake a lot of people make in windows like this is turning discomfort into confrontation. They confuse clarity with the need for an immediate break. They say things they haven't fully processed. They cut off what they haven't really understood. They make decisions under internal pressure. And then they call it destiny. But it wasn't destiny. It was impulsiveness dressed up as courage. The shadow doesn't ask for a spectacle, it asks for quiet honesty. And honesty begins when you stop outsourcing the blame. Maybe you're pinning your restlessness on someone specific. Maybe you're telling yourself the problem is external. A person, a situation, an injustice. That brings temporary relief. But it doesn't fix anything. Because the eclipse doesn't activate the other person. It activates you. It activates your need for validation, your fear of rejection, your attachment to the image you've built, your addiction to being needed, your difficulty being alone with your own truth. That's the shadow moving. And the more you try to point outward, the stronger it gets inside. There's something you've been avoiding looking at. Not because it's ugly, but because it's final. Once you admit it, you can't go back to the old version of yourself. And here's the invisible fork in the road. You can use this energy to move through a cycle, or you can use it to reinforce the same pattern with a new spiritual narrative. Yes, that happens all the time. They call it intuition when it's fear. They call it detachment when it's defense. They call it an energy cut when it's an inability to have a real conversation. That's spiritualizing the shadow, and that's the mistake that closes portals. March 3rd carries the symbolism of duality, what you show and what you feel. If those two aren't aligned, the eclipse exposes it. Not publicly, internally. And when you feel that inner exposure, your instinct is to run. But running doesn't stop the process. It just drags it out. You're not being tested by the universe. You're being confronted by your own inconsistency. And that's freeing if you're mature enough to sit with it. Over the next few days, pay attention to where you're overreacting, where you're blowing small things out of proportion, where you're stirring up conflict just to avoid silence. Those are clear signs of resistance. The eclipse isn't here to rip anything away from you. It's here to shine a light on what's already ready to end. But it only truly ends when you stop trying to bargain with the inevitable. And as this cycle makes its next move, you'll start to see something even deeper. It's not the situation that's changing, it's the identity you built around it. And when that identity starts to crack, it can feel like danger. But maybe it's not danger. Maybe it's a birth. There's a specific moment before every eclipse when the tension shifts. It stops being about the situation and starts being about who you are inside it. And that's scarier. Because as long as the problem feels external, you think you can fix it by changing the setting, switching people out, making quick decisions. But when you realize the discomfort is coming from the identity you're holding on to, the ground starts to shake. You're not just questioning something, you're questioning who you've been. The total lunar eclipse on March 3rd works like a magnifying glass over repetitive emotional patterns. And patterns aren't random behaviors, they're hardened identities. roles you took on to survive, to be accepted, to avoid losing something. The strong one, the steady one, the one who always understands, the one who never quits, the one who can handle it all. But what if you're tired of being that version? Maybe what hurts isn't the situation itself, it's the constant effort to maintain an image that doesn't represent you anymore. And when the moon moves fully into Earth's shadow, symbolically, that's what happens. The light you show the world gets temporarily covered so your inner truth can finally breathe. That's why you feel that lump in your throat for no clear reason. That's why small frustrations feel bigger. That's why your patience runs thin. It's not instability, it's a crack forming. And cracks are sacred when they mean the structure is ready to be rebuilt. But here's the sensitive part. When your identity starts to crack, the ego reads it as a threat. And during eclipse windows, the ego usually reacts in three classic ways. You either become overly rigid, trying to prove everything's under control, or you become dramatic, creating chaos so you don't have to face the silence. Or you become avoidant, pretending nothing's happening. Pay attention to which of these patterns you've been slipping into over the past few days. The eclipse doesn't create them, it exposes them. And the harder you try to cling to the old version of yourself, the more uncomfortable it feels. Because the cycle has already moved forward. The energy has shifted. Your awareness has grown. The only thing still deciding whether to keep up is your courage. There's a quiet sentence echoing inside you. I don't want to live like this anymore. Maybe you've never said it out loud. Maybe you haven't even fully put it into words, but it's there. And once that sentence starts to exist, your inner world responds. Not with fireworks, with subtle confrontations, conversations that test your limits, situations that force you to take a stand, people pressing exactly where you usually give in. That's not persecution, it's recalibration. March 3rd carries the symbolism of true expression. The number 3 speaks to voice, authenticity, alignment between what you feel and what you say. When it's doubled, it intensifies the tension between the mask and the real you. And the eclipse works right in that crack. You can keep performing to maintain external stability, or you can let the old version of you lose its grip. But there's an invisible cost to keeping up the act. Every time you silence what you really feel just to protect your image, you reinforce the cycle you say you want to end. Every time you react out of pride, you delay the freedom you claim you're looking for. Every time you blame someone else, you hand over your power. An eclipse doesn't take your power away. It gives it back. But getting your power back means losing your excuses. And that's uncomfortable. You're not on the edge of a breakdown. You're on the edge of an honesty that could reorganize your entire life. The thing is, honesty doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence. It comes with internal decisions no one else sees. In the next few days, something might happen that seems small. A comment, a gesture, an absence. And it'll hit exactly where your identity feels shaky. Don't react right away. Ask yourself, am I defending my truth or my role? Because in this cycle's next move, the split will be even clearer. And ignoring it won't stop the shift. It'll just make it happen without your awareness. There's a point in every eclipse when the sky goes quiet. It's not the exact moment of total darkness. It's the second right before an internal decision is made. You feel like something needs to be done. You just don't know what. Anxiety wants action. Pride wants a response. Fear wants protection. And this is where the split happens. Not between staying or leaving, not between speaking up or staying silent, but between reacting or moving through it. Reacting is automatic. Moving through it is intentional. Reacting is sending that text just to ease the tension. It's confronting someone to regain control. It's cutting someone off so you don't have to feel vulnerable. It's promising change without the maturity to actually follow through. Moving through it means sitting with the discomfort without turning it into a scene. The total lunar eclipse on March 3rd symbolizes the closing of an emotional cycle. And real endings don't happen when you make noise. They happen when you accept that something has already ended inside you. Maybe the relationship hasn't officially ended. Maybe the job is still there. Maybe the friendship is technically still active. But energetically, you've already left. And that's the part that hurts. Because your body is still there, but your heart has already moved on. Most people, when they realize this, try to reignite what's already gone cold. They put in extra effort. They create forced intensity. They rush into deep conversations. They try to bring back the old version of the connection. That's fear of the void. But the eclipse isn't asking you to rebuild everything overnight. It's asking for acknowledgement, to admit that you've changed, to admit your tolerance isn't what it used to be, to admit certain patterns just don't fit anymore. If you try to fix or save everything before March 3rd, you might end up reinforcing the very cycle you're supposed to be ending. Your inner world runs on alignment. If you act out of desperation, reality answers by keeping you in the same pattern, just with a new excuse. That's the invisible trap. You think you're taking action, but you're really just protecting your old identity. There's a quiet cost to conscious inaction and a high cost to impulsive action. Conscious inaction means watching without reacting, letting it fully sink in, allowing the truth to ripen before you speak it. It feels slow, but it builds something solid. Impulsive action is about relieving tension fast. It feels powerful, but it starts off shaky. Over the next few days, notice where you feel the need to prove something, where you want to win the argument, where you're craving recognition. That's where attachment lives. And during an eclipse, attachment turns into amplified pain. The split is simple but deep. You can use this window to integrate your shadow or to project it. Integration means admitting you were wrong too, that you pretended to, that you held on to something out of fear. Projection means putting all the responsibility on someone else. One path leads to quiet growth. The other leads to a more polished version of the same old cycle. And here's the hardest part. No one will know which one you chose, because that decision is internal. An eclipse isn't a public show, it's a private rite. If you move through it consciously, you might feel a strange kind of peace after March 3rd. Not because everything got fixed, but because something inside you clicked into place. If you react on impulse, you might feel temporary relief, followed by lingering confusion. See how this isn't about external fate? It's about emotional maturity. And in the final movement of this cycle, you'll understand the quiet inner stance that turns this shadow into strength. No rituals, no drama, no escape, just presence. Now you get it. It's not the eclipse that's scary, it's what it brings to light. The shadow started moving because something inside you was already ready to be seen. March 3rd just marks the symbolic peak of that process, when the moon will be completely covered and for a few minutes the light will disappear from view. But the light doesn't stop existing. It's just not where you're used to looking. What transforms this window isn't mystical. It doesn't require a ritual. It doesn't require a public announcement. It requires one quiet decision. Stop negotiating with what you already know. You know where you're betraying yourself. You know where you're overreacting to avoid being vulnerable. You know where you're pushing too hard because you're afraid of looking weak. You know where you're staying silent because you're afraid of losing something. Moving through this eclipse means cutting the drama. It means not sending that text at the peak of emotion, not making a decision just to prove you've matured, not cutting someone off just to avoid your own discomfort. It means letting the truth settle inside you before you turn it into action. Because when action comes from clarity, not anxiety, it doesn't need defending. There's a very specific kind of strength in this phase, the strength to not react right away. Very few people can do that. Most people want to fix things fast just to get back to feeling stable, but stability built on denial always comes with a cost. The total lunar eclipse on March 3rd acts like the closing of an emotional chapter. And chapters don't end with shouting, they end with understanding. Maybe you need to admit your priorities have changed. Maybe you need to accept that someone doesn't hold the same place in your heart anymore. Maybe you need to recognize that you're ready to leave a cycle that once felt essential. That's not coldness, that's maturity. And maturity hurts because it tears down illusions you built yourself. In the days right after the eclipse, you might feel a clarity that's almost unsettling, like something finally clicked into place inside you. Your mind may still try to come up with excuses, but your body will know. Your body always knows. If you move through this with awareness, what ends isn't a person or a situation, it's a pattern. And when a pattern ends, your energy shifts, your posture shifts, what you're willing to tolerate shifts, and that changes everything around you. But if you make the mistake of acting on impulse right now, you can turn revelation into noise. You can mistake intensity for depth. You can call recklessness fate, and the cycle keeps going. The shadow didn't show up to scare you. It came to hand you back to yourself, to give you back your autonomy, your alignment, the version of you that doesn't need to pretend. You're not losing anything that wasn't already ending. What you do before March 3rd decides whether this eclipse becomes freedom or just another repeat. And if all of this hit a little too close to home, you already know it's not a coincidence. Stick around. Not every cosmic window knocks twice. Before I wrap this up, I need to tell you something. For a long time, I felt that same tension whenever certain cycles were about to close. I didn't call it an eclipse. I called it a weird phase. It was that stretch of time when everything looked normal on the outside, but inside something had already checked out. I'd try to fix it, talk too much, explain too much, react too much, and every time I did that, I just dragged out something that was already ending. It wasn't until I learned not to act at the peak of emotion, to sit with the uncomfortable silence, that I realized something simple. It's not the event that changes you. It's how you show up internally when it happens. And maybe that's what this eclipse is asking of you. Not the courage to break things off, not the strength to prove anything, but the maturity to recognize what's real. If this hit you with that feeling of this is exactly what I'm going through, then you already know it wasn't random. If it resonated, hit like. That helps the channel keep bringing this kind of deeper reading. Not surface level, not loud. If something specific stood out to you, drop a comment about what you're noticing inside yourself. Not to overshare, but to mark the awareness. And if you want to stay in tune with the next shifts in this cycle, subscribe. There are still windows in 2026 that will demand this same level of presence. The next videos showing up on your screen aren't random. They continue the invisible thread that started here. And remember, the shadow doesn't come to make you smaller. It comes to make you whole. See you in the next window.